power looks different for everyone. For you, power might look like being the one who can captivate a group of people with a story and be the center of attention. Or it might be the power to influence what your friend group does over the weekend, or influence how you handle all the drama that pops up within your group. Or power might look like having a late curfew, or finally getting your driver's license. Or maybe you have an idea of the kind of power you want, but you don't have yet. Now, the idea of being in a place of power or authority, which is just someone who has more power than you do, can be exciting, and it can make us feel important and respected or even intimidating to other people. Having power gives us a sense of control, and who doesn't want that? But if we're honest with ourselves, we'd all like to feel powerful because it puts us in control of or above someone else. But if you've ever been in a place of power, you know that it doesn't always go the way you imagine, right? Like, even if you have it, there's always someone who has more. And it isn't always as great as you think it's going to be. And that can leave us with some complicated feelings about power and people who have it and people who don't, and about why we want it and what to do with it when we have it. And maybe we feel like it just never quite turns out the way we think it should. In other words, competing for and then gaining power is complicated. So what do we do about it? Power and authority have been around from the beginning, and it wasn't designed to be as complicated as sometimes it feels. The opening part of the Bible is called Genesis, or Origin. The book of Origins, who people believe was written by Moses, is about the creation of everything, including human beings. In it is written something incredibly important when it comes to our idea of authority and power. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our own image, in our likeness, so that they can rule the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and the livestock and all the wild animals and over all the creatures that move along the ground." And that's found in Genesis 1, verse 26. Now that line, "so they may rule," was written about human beings from the very beginning. According to the writer, humans were literally put on this planet and given power and authority over the rest of creation. Humans, you and I, were designed by God to have traits of God. That's what it means when it says God's image. It's with God's image and likeness in us that we're supposed to demonstrate and practice authority. Now, fast forward to today, and it's easy to see how humans have used power and authority for good. But it's also easy to see the way humans have turned things upside down from how they were originally intended to be. Power has been used to liberate people or help, and it's also been used to oppress or harm entire groups of people. Power has been used to bring peace and to start wars that have wiped out millions. Power has been used to create resources that meet people's needs, and it's been used irresponsibly in a lot of cases. So even though power was a part of the deal at creation, humans have not always used it well. But that wasn't the case with Jesus. Jesus turned the idea of power upside down. Jesus flipped the idea of power in a way people did not expect, and they didn't know what to do with it really. He did things way differently than the religious leaders of his time. Where other leaders fought to be seen as increasingly powerful by putting other people down, Jesus chose to do the opposite. Not only that, he did something none of them could pull off. He was killed by those leaders because they didn't like the way he did things. But then, biggest power flex ever, he came back to life. In fact, just so there were no questions, Jesus actually made it really clear what kind of power he had when he said this: "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." Matthew 28:18. I mean, there's really no room for questions when it comes to the statement like that. Jesus says, hey, in case you're wondering, after the whole coming back to life thing I pulled off, I have been given all authority over everything. Now that's good news, because it means that he's the perfect example of what being powerful looks like. Jesus could have used his power to put down or oppress other people, but he used it to do things people didn't expect. He set out to create an upside-down kingdom where power was used in the way God had intended for it to be. In a culture that was used to things being a certain way, it was upside down that he used his power to show that he honored and valued women, to prove that he wasn't okay with corruption and evil systems, to heal people who were sick, to hang out with outcasts in society, to forgive people who had wronged him, to include people most people would have ignored. Now, Jesus used his power, he never used it to make others feel small or hurt or oppressed. He's an example of power being turned upside down, but also it's the picture of power being used perfectly. No matter what your experience has been with people in authority, or whether you have or haven't handled power so well yourself, Jesus' example shows us how power is supposed to be used and what it's supposed to look like. He has all authority and is an authority we can follow and model when we're given power ourselves. Jesus shows us what power and authority in an upside down kingdom can and should look like. So what does that mean for you and I as we go through life trying to get this power thing right? Well, the place we can start is by choosing to rethink the way we think about power and authority. Why? Because whether we're people who push back against the authority in our lives, or people who are looking for opportunities to gain more power than we currently have, chances are we've seen or used power in a way that does not reflect what God intended. So by rethinking it, we can choose to look at Jesus' example of authority and the way God has always intended for power and authority to be used. Now, if you're ready, let's take a new approach to the way we think about authority. And here's a couple of ways to start. Think about Jesus. Before going after power or against the people who had authority over us, we should think about the things we just talked about that Jesus said and did. We should ask ourselves, what made Jesus a good authority figure? And how did he use his power? Then we'll be better able to know what to do when we're given power of any kind. We'll also know the kinds of authority figures that are worth following. And then, once you've thought about Jesus' example, you can rethink how you use the power you have. Chances are you have at least some power and influence. Think about ways you can leverage that power for good. Rethink about the authority figures in your life. Take some time and think about coaches, teachers, parents, small group leaders, bosses, and whoever else seems to have some sort of power or influence in your life. Maybe you love the way they use their power, and maybe you don't. But either way, learn to look for the good. Look for the positive things in who they are and the way they use the authority that they have. Maybe they believe deeply in your potential. Maybe they defend you when you need it. Maybe they've taught you some valuable life lessons. The truth is, authority can be annoying, but when you think about the example that Jesus gave us and you line it up with the way that people around us use their power, are there things that match up? By rethinking about the authorities in our life, we can change the way we see them and even change the way we treat those people with power moving forward. Now, we can be confident that in Jesus we have a perfect example of the way power and authority were intended to be used. See, Jesus used his power in an upside down kind of a way. As we go about our day-to-day lives and we get older and we find ourselves in positions of more authority and we find ourselves there more often, we can choose to rethink the way we think about power and authority. And when we do that, we may see our perspectives on people like parents, guardians, bosses, teachers, coaches begin to change. Because when we look for the good in our teachers, we may find that our class gets better. When we look for positive things in our coaches, we may find ourselves running harder and less tempted to talk back. When we see the ways that our parents have sacrificed for us, taking out the trash suddenly doesn't seem quite as annoying. The way we think about authority can actually change how we experience authority and how people in authority interact with us. Plus, we'll have a better picture of what good authority is supposed to be like when we're in a position of power and authority someday.